Hello and welcome. We are on a journey to uncover the secrets of living with favor and favor is an acronym here. 1 second. All right, let me make some technical adjustments here. Favor is an acronym. It's the 5 principles that we master in order to experience fulfillment within running our own successful businesses. Favor actually stands for faith, abundance, vitality, overflow, and relationships. The promise of this show is to introduce you to experts that we can ask tough questions and get solutions. I'm Lisa Mosbey. I'm your host of Living with Favor. I'm here to fulfill my purpose to advise, train, and come alongside business people, business women primarily, and help them with simple solutions for life and business. You know, today we're diving deeper into inner wisdom and well-being. Our next expert, our guest expert today is Jean Sheridan, and Jean is an inner wisdom and well-being coach. And when I read the title of that, I said, I got to do a show, name that Inner Wisdom. I love that idea. And of course, well-being is my wheelhouse as a retired holistic health practitioner. So I'm always up for talking about well-being with people. But the inner wisdom, what came to mind for me was that still small voice inside your head. So Jean specializes in stress management, mindfulness, meditation, resiliency, communication, mental health, and well-being. So I want to get into it with you, Jean. Jean, you know, when I asked you which of these 5 principles best described the topics you want to talk about, you chose vitality. And I'm curious why you think or thought vitality was how you show up in the world within your business.
Great question. So I think inner wisdom, when I'm connected to my inner wisdom, what my needs are, not what society's needs are, right? Not what I think I'm supposed to do, but really connecting to that. That's where the root of my vitality sits.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. So when I read through your kind of your website and I saw the name of that, in fact, I made a couple of notes here on testimonials because I was in awe of these. You know, I always read the testimonials about guests that come on here, and it said, Jean really hears me. She speaks the truth. She's full of positive energy. I feel an immense sense of peace and relief every time I speak to her. No matter how big or small my worries are, she always provides me with very interesting reflection points. And the last one I wrote down was, she is capable of illuminating people's lives with clarity. And that one I've actually heard said to me, which was, I was just in awe that people perceive that. So when I was thinking, you know, of inviting you on here, couple things, you know, favor can fall into lots of different areas, you know, abundant mindset. All of those testimonials about you are abundance, the abundance you bring into people, and overflow. Oftentimes I think of overflow as money, you know, how we use money and we overflow into people, but how you give of yourself and overflow into folks. And then even a little bit about relationships, because the depth of the relationships that you build with your clients, customers, and people that you serve, really, you know, they're expressing that through those testimonials, how you connect with them. So we're going to go all over. We're not going just vitality. We're getting a 4 for 1 today. We may touch on a few of these. So I'm going to ask you to give me some definitions of the way that you serve. You know, let's start with mindfulness. Can you give me kind of a definition of mindfulness?
So my own definition of mindfulness is being present to our thoughts and emotions in the moment. And Jon Kabat-Zinn talks about from a place of curiosity, and I think that's important, and non-judgmental, right? So that we're not judging the thoughts that come through our head, or we're not judging where we are at a specific time, but we're just aware of what emotions may arise. There's no such thing as an emotion that's good or bad or right or wrong. It's the behavior that can come out because a certain emotion is uncomfortable, right? Those uncomfortable emotions of anger or sadness, or, you know, oftentimes we act on those emotions, and that's the stuff that that can be bad, right? That can get people into trouble. but just honoring the presence of it. So, and we have well over 6,000 thoughts a day. And some of those thoughts are guiding where we're going, but they're not actually helping us, if that makes sense. So I think in some ways it's impossible to be mindful 24/7, but to have moments throughout the day of pausing and where am I now? What are the primary thoughts? What am I feeling right now? So that they don't get too big and out of control. That's my somewhat short answer to what I think mindfulness is.
I know. I'm amazed at how when I meet people, we just connect. So Gina and I actually work together through an app called Task Human. We're both wellness coaches on there. And so we were doing a corporate presentation, and I knew there was this affinity between the two of us, like the way that she thinks, John Kabat-Zinn, for me, I use the power of the pause all the time. When we're talking about all these different areas, they're all linked together. And many of us who are in this field, we've studied under some of the same masters. So mindfulness also leads into resiliency. I put those two together because they really are connected. So resiliency, where do we go with resiliency?
All right. So resiliency is individually, what do I need to bounce back and feel yourself, right? I know first thing in the morning, I feel myself. I feel connected in when I first wake up. And when I get to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my energy may not, right? Not only my physical energy, my mental energy, but I've had all this input. I love coaching. It is so fulfilling to me. And yet there's this pause because I'm magnifying other people's energy so that I can meet them where they are. And so I need to come back. I need to bounce back. So resiliency is just not in the bigger things when we have big, large scale events that happen, but day to day throughout the week, knowing what your flows are and then what you need. And I really come back to this idea of what the individual needs, because we tend to be in this place of people, experts out there saying, you need to do this. And I just don't believe that there's one cookie cutter approach, right? Some people need to go out and be social with a large group of friends, and that helps them come back to their resilience. Someone else, a quiet book or some, and so really understanding what our values are, understanding what our strengths are, and giving ourselves the time to engage in whatever that is.
What comes to mind is a story that I tell about, how we're not the same at 9 a.m. as we are at 9 p.m. Both can be our best. It's where we're at in that moment, and when we can accept that and step into the power of that we don't have to put on a happy face. We don't have to wear the mask, that we can just be who we are. And that's good enough. That will always be enough for the people who truly are your friends, the people that you're really connected with, those people that are your tribe. They're there to support you in the good and the good enough times. I think that too ties into that resiliency. How do we self-care? How do we take care of ourselves? How do we provide the time, create the pause, and then find that peace to just pull us all back together and let go of all of the things that may be attached to our energy at the moment. As coaches, we experience that a lot. And so we need strength we need to be empowered to find those resilient behaviors for ourselves. So I love how you connected all those. Go ahead.
You said something really important, which is the self-care. And the self-care is really deeper, bigger work. It's bubble baths and pedicures are lovely, and massages, all of that is lovely. But the self-care of really knowing who you are, knowing your boundaries, knowing that there are times in life where we have to overextend. But then, okay, we need to do it for whatever's going on in our life, but then being able to come back, giving ourselves that space to truly be resilient.
Yeah, we don't want to get broke down. We need to break through.
Yes.
Sometimes we have to do the things to break through. But getting to the point of having a breakdown means we didn't implement that self-care. We didn't create that pause. We didn't stop that that momentum and just say, hey, I can pick this up again, but I need to be strong enough to do that. So I'm going to shift into mental health then, mindfulness, resiliency, mental health, and well-being. We can maybe put those together or not, depending on how you want to define them. Let's go mental health next.
I love it. I'm so glad that this was one of the words, because mental health is health. And there really isn't, we've got this long history of separating these two. Like there's health, which is physical, and mental. And the truth is they are interconnected in so many levels. And we have this idea, I hear it over and over again, that people think of mental health as mental illness. And I firmly believe that if we're talking just mental health, it's on a continuum, right? There could be, I've had a number of head injuries, sports-related head injuries over the years. And when those have happened, I'm not functioning at my peak performance. Just as if a runner breaks their leg, they're not able to run at their peak performance. But we don't say they're bad or they're wrong because they broke their leg. Give them the space and the time to heal, right? And to get back. And I think it's the same thing with mental health. And it does come back to resilience and what do we individually need to be our best and on the continuum, right? Because it can change. That if there's trauma or loss, we may move down that continuum a little bit more. And so then what do we need to do to bring us into the higher levels of our mental health? Does that am I making sense there?
Yeah, you are. There can be we can have a broken brain, we can get a bruise, we can have a concussion, and we can have trauma to our brain. That is one type of physical injury to our head. But the other injury that can happen is also trauma through emotions and experience. And that's where mental health comes in, is the health of those emotions and that spiritual and relationship connection that we have to the world. And so it needs attention, just like maybe our broken brain or our broken leg, that concussion or that physical trauma needs time to heal, as does some of that other piece, the health that comes along with the mindset and the mental piece of it. Is that, kind of another way to sum it up?
Yes, thank you. That was probably much clearer than I was saying it. And the other part, I think, is that we aren't given the skill sets growing up, or let me say, very few people are given the skill set to live a healthy mental health life.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not something that's taught in school. Often we don't get it in our family of origin. So many people now are in this place because I think technology has exploded the amount of information that's coming in for all of us, the overwhelm that is happening. And so many of us don't have the skills. I've been doing this work for 40 years and I'm watching it. And even 40 years ago, we didn't have the technology to help us understand how the brain functioned, right? Yeah. And so a lot of clients come to me to manage anxiety, manage stress, and it's really teaching them the tools that they individually need. Yeah. To help them be resilient, right? It comes back to
they're all tied together for sure.
Yeah. All tied together. And again, it's not a one and done. Like I've had people come to me and say, I can't do yoga for an hour. Okay. But they like it, right? They just, well, what about for 10 or 15 minutes?
Right.
Oh, I can do that. That's okay. And then they become successful because 15 minutes is all they need to get them centered and grounded and connected, right? And so it's that or breath work, or, there's, as you know, there's so many different modalities out there, but most people just don't, not most, many people just don't have the knowledge of what they are.
That's what we're here for. We're bringing these things to light and helping people to find those tools. Really, I mean, that's why I call it easy digital tools or simple solutions, because they don't have to be complicated. I've really truly learned that life does not have to be complicated. We just don't necessarily have the resources. We don't have those tools that we need. So that's what we get to do by being experts in our field, is bring it to the light, bring it to the world, and share that. I was thinking of coping mechanisms versus actually really resolving things. That was something else that came up too, was like, most of us learn coping mechanisms throughout our life. We can cope with things, but we stuff emotions, we stuff feelings, we stuff trauma. And then all of a sudden, one day, boom, there's a volcano that erupts within us. And I think that mental health is getting healthy from within. It really is just like, how do we deal with all of those things that we've learned to cope with, find a way to bring them to the surface, experience, they say, feel the feels, or, have the breakthrough, get beyond it, feel the feelings and go through it. I think all of that is connected to what creates health within our mindset, our attitude, how we show up in the world, how we can experience trauma, move through it, and still experience joy, that we don't get stuck in the rut and be, permanently affixed in that state of pain or grieving or sorrow or whatever those emotions might be. There is resolve on the other side of it. And having somebody, just like I come along people in their business with technology, you come along people within their life to deal with those emotions. I want to jump into communication a little bit, because all of these pieces to me tie together with how we not only communicate with ourselves, but how we communicate with the world, like how we show up. Coming out of COVID, being stuck in the house, isolated from people, like, we're facing tremendous challenges, especially in the youth. Like, they don't want to go back to school. They don't want to be out in the world. Many I've worked with, I'm sure there's equally as many that do want to, but I'm really focused on those people, whether it's youth or adults. How do we tie all this together? The mental health, the resiliency, the ability to communicate with the world and show up as who you are, after COVID. Like, what are you seeing, and what are some key things that we need to be paying attention to help people?
It's listening. So when we talk about communication specifically, I think that is the key. So often we are busy, and I know this was true for me in my earlier, my younger days. I was so interested in wanting people to know who I am, and that I wasn't listening, or I would listen to sort of respond, right? So I wasn't 100% present in what they were saying, holding that container to hear what they were saying. I'm up in my head thinking about what am I going to say, right? And so that goes back to mindfulness. If I can catch myself, if I can be aware, oh, I'm trying to think about what a response is, let me come back and fully listen to what the person is saying, what is really going on, right? Because then I can respond from that place. And there's an element of, if it's, because there's so many different levels of conversation, right? If my significant other is running out to the store and I need them to pick up, I don't know, cheese, right?
Yeah.
That's one level of conversation. We don't need to do a deep dive. And then the conversation, if there's conflict or disagreement, right? That's a whole different level. And so with that, if I'm present and listening to what the other person is saying, what aspects of what they're saying can I agree with? Because we tend to, I've got my side of it, right?
Yeah.
And the other person has their side, and we're trying to convince each other that we're right.
I like that.
And so if we can pause, what aspects of what they're saying do I agree with?
Yeah. Because
And
we're not
build
enemies, so often that conflict or struggle is like one side has to win. We're not teammates, but if we approach it as a teammate, like what are we in agreement with? How do we move forward with that? We don't have to focus on the things that we're not in agreement. And all of that stuff actually does get shaken out. When we can get on the same page and start focusing on the yes, on the agreement, some of that other stuff, we find we're using different words, but we really are in agreement because we attract people like you and I attracted to each other, like-minded people. So it's more likely than not that you're going to have things in common, that you're going to see a lot of things the same. Why do we focus on the things that are different? I love that. That is a completely different take on that communication piece. I use the word still small voice, and I used it when I introduced this. What is that still small voice in our head? We not only do we communicate with the world, but we're always communicating with our subconscious mind. So I want to hear your take on that still small voice.
So that's interesting. And it's interesting how you framed it, because just has the still small voice in our head. And for me, and this may just be me, my still small voice generally is not in my head. Yeah. Now I may get an intuitive hit, I call it. And it's one, it's done, and it's gone.
Okay.
But my still small voice comes out of, I will say, my abdomen, for lack of a better word. When
Sure.
I'm grounded in and I'm quiet, it's as if this it's not a voice.
Spirit within. Spirit within.
There's something that comes up through me. I will say a knowingness for me. It's a knowingness that it's true. Now, for years, I needed to get affirmation from others, from my own coaches, from therapists even, right? That was legitimate and that I wasn't crazy. Because there's a whole element of, growing up and being told that I was crazy. I think often women get that, right? And so being able to quiet ourselves enough to know how, and I think it comes up for different people, different ways, right? So for you, you said it's like this small, quiet voice in your head.
But it does come from within. It does come from within. And then
yes, it's a very different thing. And one of the things that I do in coaching is help people understand what theirs is. And not being in that sort of cluttered of those 6,000 thoughts that are constantly going around.
Yeah. Interesting. So how do we work with our subconscious? You said 6,000 thoughts a day. I've read some studies back in 2012. I think it was Stanford University said that it was 60,000 thoughts a day. There's other studies say 6,000. So it's a lot. But one of the things that both of those studies referred to was that many of those thoughts that we have are repetitive. In fact, a staggering number, like upwards of 80%, can be repetitive. And so if we're constantly repeating negative thoughts over and over in our heads, what are we going to get out of that? What's the outcome that's going to happen? So how can we start to work with the mindfulness, the resiliency, the self-talk, the subconscious mind, and feeding that better communication so that we have a better day? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. Great question. I think that's where the mindfulness meditation comes in, is sitting quietly and being aware of the thoughts and noticing without judgment from a place of curiosity, right? But I have tended to work with a lot of people, and I was certainly like this in my younger days. Sitting still was not going to work for me. And so going for a walk, I know for me, 20 minutes of walking, riding my bike, doing something physical, all of a sudden that it quiets down, right? So finding that thing for you, and maybe there's multiple things to help quiet down the noise that's going on. I think that's one thing. Becoming aware of your negative thought patterns. I'm full disclosure here. When my stress level gets really high and I get overwhelmed, I have a monster under the bed that comes out. And that's what I refer to it as, my monster under the bed. And it's my monster of self-doubt. And so it took me some time and working with a coach to see, oh, so now I get to choose. Am I going to believe that voice of self-doubt that can get really loud because it's a monster, right? Yeah. And the reason I call it the monster under the bed, right, is that children, we often think that there's a monster in the closet or under the bed, and we react as if that's real. So if I remind myself and I talk to that self-doubt, then I can talk to it from that place of, oh, look at that. The monster under the bed has come back to visit. So it might be there and it might be really loud, but I'm not buying into it. I'm not buying what it's selling. And so that's the next step. First, being aware of it. The second is then somehow disconnecting. I had a colleague years ago, and she used to say, I'm not buying what you're selling. Thanks for sharing, but I'm not buying what you're selling. Other people give it a name. Oh, hello, Henry. Look at you. But whatever that is, and we all have our own ways, so that we're not believing it, because I think that's what we do. We tend to believe that all of our thoughts and all of our feelings are true and their direction, and they're not. So it really is sort of unpacking them in a way that we can really, is this valid, right? And for years and years and years, I tried affirmation. And for me, I know affirmation works for a lot of people, but for me, in that approach, I was doing battle with the monster under the bed, right? Because it kept coming out. Once I just sort of said, oh, this is right, then there's no battle. I've taken away its power.
Yeah.
And then,
resistance. Yeah.
And from there, I can do affirmation. The other thing that I'm a huge advocate of is asking questions. Our minds love to solve problems, absolutely love to solve problems. And it's amazing the serendipity that can happen. So I can't think of the author right now, but he has a whole book about, what does he call it? It's sort of, rather than affirmations, turning them into questions so that our mind is given something to focus on. Like, how have I become blah, 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 whatever it is. And yeah. And that was a real game changer for me personally.
I have to cut you off, Jean, but that's why we have that 30 minutes afterward where we get to ask questions. So in the future, I want you all to come and join us for the question and answer part after the show. We've had, Jean, this time has gone so fast. I still have like 6 more questions to ask of you. So I'm thinking we may need to come back. We were trying to put all 4 of those categories in. I think we did a really good job of covering some relationship stuff with ourselves, communication, kind of a little bit of, overflow and abundance, but most importantly, that vitality that comes from within. I think you picked the right word. It described it perfectly. So I want to thank you for the time here today. For those of you that want to connect with Jean, look in the show comments. You can go to my YouTube channel, Lisa Mosbey, and you'll find information about this episode, how to connect with Jean if you want, to carry on this conversation and to actually reach out and ask the tough questions of her. So on this journey together, we hope that you take away a little bit more knowledge, unleash your confidence, discover the life experience that makes you an expert and gives you something to share with the world. I'm Lisa Mosbey, your host. Thank you for letting me introduce you to my expert friends and share a bit of their advice, share a bit of my advice, and a little bit of training in there. I want you to experience joy and fulfillment, both personally and while running your successful business, creating a residual income for you and your family. If you're a woman ready to grow your business and you need someone to come alongside you to get your digital marketing system set up and turned on, I want to talk to you. My team and I work with business owners who struggle, and we have simple solutions for both personally and professionally to get things back on track. So I invite you to book some time with me. Just go to livingwithfavor.now.site and hit book it. You can book some time with me. You know, the best part of this show of Living with Favor is the conversation after the show. So I hope you can linger longer when you do have a chance to show up live. Go deeper and ask the tough questions of our guests. I invite you to come back. We're here every week. So join us next week and we'll see you on a future show. Again, Jean, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. My pleasure, Lisa. It was wonderful. And I hope to come back and do a deeper dive.
Excellent.
All right.